Sure.
Call the meeting to order. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. Happy New Year. We're into the month of March. We're gonna do roll call. And please say aye if you're here. Chairperson Peggy Buffet here. Vice Chair Tony.
Here.
Here. Scott Berman. Your secretary, not too. Kenneth Fletcher, supervisor.
Here.
Calvin Jones.
Here.
Miss Krista. No. Laura Miller, not yet. Rachel.
Here.
And Brian. Not coming.
No.
All right. All right, we have a quorum. And
It's fantastic news. Approval of the agenda. Yeah, we take a vote to approve the agenda.
All right, can we take a vote to approve the agenda
So
as submitted? All right.
Support.
So,
I'm good. I get an electronic one. But I can't write notes on PDF.
all right,
No big deal.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I
And I don't really have to take notes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, do public comments? Is anybody here for public comments? None? All right, no public comments. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes of December 12th?
So support.
Either way. Okay.
All right, all those who signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Approved, awesome, moving through, any old business? None? All right, new business. Next steps in the CIA process, and I see that we have Suzanne with us via Zoom.
Hi, Suzanne.
How are you?
I am well,
Okay.
thank you. I'm up in Traverse City watching lots of snowfall.
Can we hear you? Can we hear her?
Yeah, can we turn that up, Brian? We can't quite hear you. Suzanne.
ask your assistant, Brian.
Oh. Can you hear me better now?
It's
Getting
good
there.
that there's controls here, but I have no idea how to.
Okay, but say something else.
I don't know what to
Yes.
say. It's always awkward.
Right. Do you want to start with the next steps in the CIA process?
Sure. I'm gonna share my screen, so do that. Oh, you have to enable me.
Yeah. There you go. You should be enabled, Suzanne.
Okay, thanks, Brian. This here. Beginning. And oh, can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, can you see my screen?
No.
Okay. Let me stop sharing for a second. It's like all of a sudden everything just looks like it just froze on me, which is very unusual. I don't have that problem normally, so.
It says you're sharing the screen, it just is black.
Yeah.
It says your screen share is loading. Okay, well, it's loading. So I will just talk while it's loading, apparently. We'll see how this works. So today we thought it's been a little while, and so thought we'd start off. I know it was later on your agenda, but I'd like to just do a quick review of the themes that we heard from all of those listening sessions, and talk about those just a little bit to see if those still kind of based on your memory of the past year still resonate with you, and because I think some of those lessons learned are a good outline or a good basis for the discussion this afternoon. And then we wanted to talk about corridor design, community engagement, and data to be able to do that. So, my thing is still, let me see if I can go out and then go back in. Hold on. Because it looks like my computer's totally frozen.
Two options, reboot or hammer.
Yeah, I mean, I can't like even do, like if I hit Control Alt Delete, it won't even, it's not responding. Wonder, apologize, I've not had this problem. Oh, there we go. Cancel. Can you see my screen?
Let me see your face.
Now we see you. That's
Yeah, we don't see it.
now.
There was this weird beeping noise at me. All right, let's try it one more time. And if not, then we'll talk through it. Your screen sharing is paused. Resume share. I have never had this problem. What is this? Resume sharing. Well, I will stop that. All right, so we'll just go. So there, I'll just read them, or if we can, here, I'm going to send them to, I'll send this to you, Brian, as a PDF. Because that might be faster.
Is it the same as what was included in the packet, Brian?
Yeah. No.
Is that what was included in the packet, Suzanne? Or you have a
It's-
separate presentation?
Yeah, basically it is. I mean, it's basically the outline. I just put it into a PowerPoint because it is an easier format for discussion.
Gotcha.
But I sent it to Brian. Basically, if you look at your agenda and you look at that bottom area and you see the key themes
Absolutely.
there. Okay, so that's let's start with talking about that. So on the key themes, I flipped one, so I put multimodal infrastructure first, and I just moved down the one for partnerships. But we'll go in the order that you guys have. So partnerships. So one of the key themes noted was that many agencies are willing to partner with the Saginaw Highway CIA to make positive changes within the corridor. These opportunities range from expensive undertakings, such as potentially reconfiguring the roadway, to smaller endeavors, such as how to do a mural project. Is there anything else under partnerships that you wanted to note, just kind of as a theme? Was there anything that surprised you when we heard the theme of partnerships from the different people who came and shared their insights with you?
Really.
It's not for me.
No, I think we always had the opinion that we wanted to be a very collaborative body that works with the broader community to collectively decide what all of us want for the corridor. So I don't think the idea of partnerships and working closely with others is out of what we were expecting.
Perfect. Okay. So Brian, I'm on slide 9 next. Awesome. Thanks, guys. So, so the idea of collaboration, I think, is important for the partnership piece. And I'm just thinking of how these themes then can translate into kind of, they're not just themes from what you heard, but maybe they're also themes for how you want to do your work or how we want to organize some of the conversations we might have with the public. So that's kind of why we're going through this. So the other theme, multimodal infrastructure. Investments in transportation should not simply be focused on the automobile. Talents looking for walkable communities. There is a significant opportunity for frequent bus service along the corridor. People with a range of mobility needs should be accommodated so that everyone can reach stores and restaurants. And bicycling is a form of active transportation, not just for recreational use.
The one thing though, in the area of infrastructure, and we definitely want to make sure it's not just for automobiles, but I think we also need to recognize that the Saginaw corridor is always going to be mainly or primarily a huge avenue to move people and to move cars in each direction. And I think sometimes some discussions in the past have had a unrealistic opinion that we can kind of turn the corridor into like this nice little downtown street, you know, with all these people walking and going from, I don't think it's ever gonna be that. You can certainly greatly improve the ability to get around on foot and bicycle and everything else, but it still is gonna be a busy corridor to get people east and west. And we need to, I think, recognize that and never think it's gonna suddenly turn into this Little Point Main Street.
No.
No, I think the cars move way too fast, and if you're not gonna have a bicycle lane, something like that, it really is not gonna work. I wouldn't feel comfortable on a bike. So I'm out of the border right now.
Unless it's protected. So
What do you
I
mean?
think, I think
Right
even,
away.
and did you say that you wanted bicycle lane? I think even the advocates were saying that it wouldn't work on here,
No,
I wouldn't be in support of that, but that's just me. I mean, I know there are bicyclists who want it, but there's gotta be something, because that traffic is just very fast. If you ever walked out anywhere near the street.
I think more doable there would be a 10-foot wide multi-use pathway that runs parallel with Saginaw.
Agreed.
To get the cars off the actual road, but then also still have a good safe place for bicycles and stuff too.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Percent.
Yes, certainly not in the road. I mean, that's just not,
Right.
No.
it's not, nowhere is that a good idea.
No,
Well, and the idea, so what's not included in this too is the mention of freight. Right, so you also have quite a few large trucks that also go down the corridor. That we need to kind of recognize.
you said freight?
Freight trucks.
Freight.
It's not that heavy of a truck route though, is it? I don't think I see too many I don't see semis driving down Saginaw.
I don't think the length of it would, chunks of it would be for just getting out the highway to go to
Right.
Lake Bryson Canal,
Right.
would be my assumption.
other than occasional deliveries for food or whatever, but not a lot.
Okay,
Well, what is the size of truck that comes in that goes to like Walmart and stuff like that, the big?
51 feet probably for a Walmart. It might be as small as 35, but as big as 51.
Yeah, that would design it probably for a 62. WB 62.
The 62 probably has to be articulating, so they probably have to have a way for the.
I'm just saying, I do see a lot of the larger trucks. When it's
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. So I mean, that is, you're trying to balance all of those things, right? When we think about this corridor, because it is heavily used, as you said, by cars, but you also, and it's in here, it's further down, but the idea of housing, right? And so if we're looking at more of a mixed use environment, you'd anticipate that there would be more people who aren't just relying on a car, they're coming by some other means too.
Going back to infrastructure though, regarding the bike concept. East-west, I totally agree with Ken. It's got to, someplace beyond the curb, protected, 10-foot wide, whatever. But is there anything east, north, south? Has there been any enhancements there going north, south anywhere? I'm just asking the question if there's anything from the community or anybody, or is that a question that we would pose?
Well, we do have, it just got pushed back to 2025, but we will have a north-south pathway that will come up South Mall Drive and then cross
okay.
and connect into our east-west
Oh, okay,
pathway there.
okay.
That will basically, if you're familiar with the pathway that's in front of Waverly High School, it'll connect into that. So it'll come up Elmwood across Ivan to South Mall Drive and then up South Mall Drive.
Good.
So that's one
Yeah, so
kind
that's
of
one.
north-south
Mhm.
connector.
So probably pulling maps when we get to that point would be super helpful.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Okay, and then slide 10, I think one of the themes we talked about was placemaking. So the corridor needs to have a there, which connects to surrounding neighborhoods. It's a location to drive through and requires a stronger draw as a place where people come to. Successful corridor transformation goes beyond simply attracting businesses. It's a combination of things: walkability, density, art, good design, event programming, that make it a desirable place to be.
We don't want people to leave, do we? Just cross that out, would it?
Hey,
Was that the
Suzanne.
one?
Suzanne, can we back up to multimodal again?
Sure.
When we get into corridor planning, Tony mentioned the north-south pathways, but typically, would you consider like crossings, some safe crossings as part of the multimodal, or is that more into like a safety type? Because to me, that would also be, especially if they do a boulevard, having the refuge areas or whatever, and determining where would be safe places. 'Cause to me, it's not realistic to have it at every single intersection or whatever, but looking at where would be some safest places to cross.
Yeah, I was out there a couple of weeks ago, Brian. There was somebody crossing literally right across from the BP station, going to Dunkin' Donuts, just crossing right in the middle of the street in the middle of the day. Like, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, that type of thing, right? You're trying to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, it's in some cases, you're like, what, 7 lanes wide? If you've got a right-hand turn lane, 2 throughs, center turn lane, 2 throughs in the opposite direction. And then if there's tapers going into a business, or I mean, depending on where you're at, I mean, you could get it feeling like seven lanes.
Correct.
Right. And so if you're crossing that at 12 feet each lane, right, that's 84 feet. That doesn't include the gutter pan. So 80, if you, what, two foot gutter pans, Tony. So I always like to do 1 foot, but 18 inch. So, I mean, by the time, if you include the right of way, I mean, it's easily 100 feet to cross. And if you put that in context for neighborhoods, like small neighborhoods that have really small blocks, it can be 200 feet long. So kind of the scale of it is significant. You're thinking about, somebody crossing, the length of time it takes, whether they're able-bodied. So definitely safety is a really great one to include mention of. Yeah. Okay. So that, well, and that could also be a value, right? I mean, that could be something that you express as being a priority, and especially certainly when we get into talking about corridor design itself, that would be something that we want to recognize. And actually, it's also speaking MDOT's language, but there's different versions on how you measure safety. What does that look like? So that would be an interesting conversation. Okay, on the placemaking one, are there any thoughts on this theme?
For me, it's hard. I mean, I think it's really important. It's hard to get into a lot of talk until you think about, where is the design, where's the central location? I mean,
And of course,
I think it would be important to have it, right? And I think I've got, like all of you, I'm sure, lots of ideas and thoughts, and these crosswalks, I think they need to be I think they're hugely important. I think they need to be coordinated with where we're strategically putting bus stops so that people don't have to duplicate that travel, because you're not gonna have bus stops everywhere. So there's a part of me that thinks that we have places, Lansing Mall being one of them, that seems like a natural place to somehow claim some space and make a place making space if it could be done, but Brookside offers the land to do it, and those prices are falling. The expectations from the estate are falling rapidly, right? They've been lowering some of their properties by 50% in weeks, so.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yes, it is.
That's funny.
So Suzanne, what are some of your thoughts on it? I mean, I know you've been living and breathing this for a long time as well.
Yeah, I think this is, so I think this is one of those intangibles in a lot of ways. I mean, there's certainly elements of it that you can list, and some of them are on here that make it that way. I think the hard part is it kind of goes back to scale, right? Scale of the corridor. And how do you get, when you think about placemaking, kind of this intimacy in the place, like there's different levels, right? So it's, well, I've arrived on the Saginaw Highway corridor, right? So that's kind of gateways. You could talk about these bigger scale items that let you know you're here. But if you're talking about really trying to get human interaction and that sense of belonging, that's at a different scale. That's more at a people scale. So we may want to think about placemaking at a couple different levels, a couple different scales for the corridor, because you're not going to be able to go, like Ken said, it's not a downtown. It's not going to be, you're not going to shrink it down to 2 lanes with on-street parking on both sides. So how do you get some of those different elements? And it could be in different places. It could be a redevelopment of the Lansing Mall or the other, the Ide property, that's where that scale happens in different pieces, but it's not expected, it's not one size fits all along the entire corridor. So I think that's kind of where I would probably make a recommendation on that. And that's interesting to me because I've not really framed it in that way before, kind of that's scaling up or scaling down placemaking, depending on kind of who your audience is. So that could be interesting. Okay. The next one, well, 2, retail and mixed use, and then dense and diverse housing stock. So what we heard in our listening sessions was retail is not dead. And on the Saginaw corridor, it is doing well. Consideration must be given to the best locations to support retail nodes that can become mixed use villages to support placemaking in a walkable community. Does that seem accurate based on what we heard in our discussions?
Yes.
So far, yeah.
And then the other one is housing needs to be considered as an essential component for the economic success of the corridor. Increasing density and providing various housing choices for an increasingly diverse range of households will strengthen the corridor, support businesses, and make it more resilient to economic downturns. So, and this is a bigger paradigm shift, right? From thinking about Saginaw as being kind of retail only, and serving that versus the idea of adding in housing. And so is everybody, I guess the question is everybody comfortable with that idea?
I am.
Yes, 100%.
Oh. I know you guys were, it indicated in the paper, you guys were talking about some smaller housing, not in this area though, right?
Not in the corridor, definitely having, different types of housing. I'm not sure though if along the actual corridor, you're gonna see much interest in building too much housing. I think it's still a pretty busy road there to be too much housing located on, but clearly in the township in a much broader sense, clearly there is interest in different types of housing. Obviously, clearly a lot more rentals, a lot more multifamily, but different models of rentals, the individual house type apartments is something that could potentially come here at some point, even townhouses and different types of thing, ranch types houses and stuff we're seeing in Redwood. What Chris K was talking about at one time for there's development out there. So I think you're gonna continue to see a lot more housing. That's not just traditional houses coming into the township. I
Okay,
just don't know if it's gonna be along the corridor per se.
okay.
But clearly the I property could,
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
property down that way.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly could see housing.
Sure.
You know, that could definitely be part of that development.
Yep. And then I think we started with partnership. Where am I? We started with partnership, so we're good there. So okay, so that was just kind of I wanted to start there because I think that will kind of help some of this discussion before we get into that. So Brian, let's go back up to slide 2. And then let's go down one more. Sorry, 3. So the corridor design at your meeting in December, you had identified kind of as your list of priorities, the top one being the corridor design, the road itself. So I just want to validate with all of you that yes, that's the first piece of fruit we want to pick.
Yeah, I think we all think that's important.
All right, and so because MDOT is going to be working on designing that road and Brian's been working on figuring out the timeline with them, but I guess there's 2 questions, and this is also for another area, but do you want to work, I guess, in subcommittees, or do you want to do your work as a body? What we're thinking is if there's a subgroup, rather than, it's hard with MDOT and you're sitting down and you don't want 40 people at a table, but you want enough people where there can be a good discussion and you can get things accomplished. So the idea was whether or not you wanted to assign kind of an MDOT engagement subgroup to meet, or do you want to rely on staff to meet with MDOT and carry your message forward? The question is, how involved as a group do you want to be in the discussions with MDOT? Certainly if there's design decisions and other things, it would come to you, like we would want to inform you of some of the recommendations and all of that, and then you would want to ratify that before it goes back to MDOT. But certainly there's some of those discussions that happen with MDOT on kind of what's inbounds, what's out of bounds, where's, what gets, who pays for what, how does that happen, what are our goals from the township's perspective, because it's really important that we have people at the table that state the goals of the CIA, so that if MDOT is thinking one way, it may not align with what you're thinking as a group. And so we want to make sure that we're at the table having those discussions and that representation.
What do you all think?
I think there should be representation from the group involved, whether that's a subgroup or everybody feels compelled that they have to be there.
I like the subgroup idea. Personally, I think it would be, as things sort of evolve and sort of. I take it, Brian, there hasn't been any type of conversation yet on schedule and if they're gonna get going on planning or anything like that. So I don't know what the immediate need is, but.
Well, MDOT is, they will start at least early preliminary design on a boulevard for that section.
right?
Yeah, in 2020, sometime in 2024. Construction for that got pushed back now to 2028. But so now is the time, and in talking with MDOT, I mean, they're happy to have a representative at our meeting, but obviously a smaller group is a little more nimble, and there's different components, of course, of the project to think about, and there's so if MDOT has, they'll have a lot of people on the project. We can't meet with the entire project team every single time, so I think we have to kind of pick our spots, and they're certainly interested in having us involved right from the get-go. So I think if we can do that. The rest of Saginaw is still outside of their scope, so they are still trying to figure out what to do with that. So it needs reconstruction. They've said they will probably do limited preventative maintenance. I mean, they'll certainly keep it a travelable road and fix things as it needs to, but it needs a major work. It needs a major rework, so they don't want to pour too much resources into it if they're gonna have to dig it all back out to do a project. But at this point, they still do not have they're still outside of their scope for any type of funding being applied towards that. So, but it is on their radar, and they're Aaron Chilati, who is the new TSC manager, says they're constantly looking and trying to figure out how do they move something forward with that.
So they offered to come to our meetings like this, go through, I don't know if it's every quarter or something.
Yeah,
that you can help.
basically whatever we need. She was more, do I need to have somebody who sits in on the meetings?
Yeah.
Or I kind of viewed it as, I don't know that they necessarily need to have somebody at our meetings unless we request that they come and present, just because I know they'll have, if you remember, when we had them here, they brought 5 different people. So, you know, they'll have their non-motorized person, they'll have their, you know, engineer, their TSC manager. So it's kind of hard to, you know, request that they have everybody here. So, but they'll be here as requested.
I almost think it sounds like what we need to do is put together an engagement committee where we would have obviously township planning staff, but then we have a representative or a couple
Yep.
representatives from the CIA board to include our views of the corridor. Include a representative, not all of them, but a representative of non-motorized transportation, a representative of CATA, and just have a small, you know, group that has all those different elements represented that could then meet on a regular basis and, you know, kind of bounce the ideas around and everything. And obviously, things could be brought if there needed to be a broader discussion of the whole CIA board. You know, obviously the committee could bring back what some of the discussions are heading and stuff, but that would, you know, keep everybody engaged and have all those various elements that we want to see improved on the corridor represented as we continue to meet with MDOT.
Yeah, I like
That's a great.
approach, because I'd be hesitant for us to be meeting with MDOT without your staff. That's gonna be involved, and then I also want to be really respectful of MDOT's time as well. So it's the most bang for our buck, and I think that approach could be that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and so MDOT, you know, you as the locals, you have that local knowledge, you see it every day, you live it. And they are trying to do their project, but there's information they don't have that you do. Same thing with CATA and your non-motorized folks and all that. So they appreciate having those discussions. We don't need to belabor it and have, you know, a meeting every month with them, but it's more as needed. And I think it's figuring out, which we'll get into the community engagement piece, kind of what are your goals for the corridor? Obviously you need to move traffic, but there's other design elements that you may want to have included. And then being able to articulate that to MDOT so they can anticipate that as they go through design. And so, yeah, unless they've already designed it, but then you're going to want to have that conversation with them anyway, to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
I guess that would be the question. Are we doing this together with MDOT or are we trying to get ahead of MDOT?
So my recommendation would be that you're just a little bit ahead of MDOT. That you have an idea of what you want, and then you're sharing that with MDOT so that they're aware of it, but then you're problem solving how to get there together. Tony, I was gonna say, have you
Just trying to visualize in my head, how does that look?
So I'll give you, yeah, I can give you an example. I'll tell you a story. So I can give you an example. Plainfield Township, I've been working with them. We did a corridor plan for Plainfield called Reimagine Plainfield. My planning presentation about Plainfield was, can we blow it up? It's the name of the title of the presentation. Because you are in a much better position than they are, but they're a first tier suburb and their mall closed 20 years ago. It opened 50 years before, prior to that. So their CIA actually went defunct because they had no new tax increment coming in for about 6 years. They weren't getting any investment happening. And if there was, it was kind of a can of new paint and nothing else. They still, up until last year, had a standing Whitmark building that still had Whitmark signage on it. And if you remember how long Whitmark, how long it's been since Whitmark was open, I think it's almost 30 years ago. But so what we did then is we identified improvements we wanted to see along the corridor. Noting, how big some of the tapers are huge. It's difficult for pedestrians to cross in certain areas. And so we identified kind of a wish list. And right now we just finished modeling, we're doing some traffic analysis on neighborhood streets to understand that a little bit better. Even though it's a township, they said we want to understand so that we can go to the road commission and we can go to MDOT and say, these are some of the improvements we'd like to see. The township has set aside monies to go along with the investment that MDOT is making in the hopes that they can leverage grants then to do additional things along the corridor to improve it. But it's kind of like we're collecting additional data, doing access management recommendations. That's different a little bit than what you have along Saginaw Highway, because you guys have been very aggressive and good with your access management. But they've got that list. They're sharing that with MDOT staff before they even go into design, so MDOT's aware of it. MDOT then will take that into consideration, and we're going to have a follow-up meeting to kind of make a determination about what should be in and what should be out. And that will then work with MDOT's consultants when they're out there, if they're doing a survey for a certain intersection or something, they'll know if there's additional things they should grab when they're out there for survey, if we need additional information. And then when we do costing, we can include those elements that the CIA wants included in there, and then figure out how we're going to pay for it together. So that's kind of the process we're going through right now, as an example.
Yeah. So that's a process, Brian, that would be, Suzanne would help us as the township's advisor here. That's the intent. Okay. Good. Yeah, just. No. Just trying to understand where the process and the steps, and just, I like the idea of definitely getting out ahead. I guess with the community engagement piece, are we still intending to go out to the community as a CIA? Is that still on the docket, or are we gonna wait until MDOT and try to mirror their plan? I'm just asking a question.
I guess it depends what you mean by going out to the community in terms of just the reworking of Saginaw. I'm not sure as far as for the entire CIA plan and what we want to see in the corridor. Absolutely. Do we necessarily want to go to the public to ask what they want and MDOT's redoing the road? I'm not sure.
Well, but we are that's exactly what I'm asking the question for, because there is overlap.
True.
So that's all, so schedule wise, what would that be? Because you're impacting, I mean, you're talking the boulevard, which, all right, how big do we want the boulevard to be? I mean, we could have a conversation, and you brought up the trucks, right? It's like, well, I don't think we need to design to the biggest truck that you have out there. And, I mean, that's what I'm saying is that's a sensitivity that, sidewalk widths, right? That could be another conversation. Lighting could be another conversation. I mean, there's a lot of snowballs.
Yep.
I don't know how you do that without doing some type of public engagement. This question.
I always thought we were going to have public engagement. I think the fears that I hear that make sense to me people are much more prone to complain after the fact than they are to give positive impact during the process. And I think that just is what it is, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't create opportunities to gather, to gather feedback.
Mhm.
And then again, there's a sense when people give feedback, they think that you're gonna do something
You
about
gotta
it,
do
and
Mhm.
that's also dangerous because,
Yeah.
you know, they recommend bike
Yeah.
paths in the road, and we don't think it's a good idea, right? So,
Yeah. I think, maybe Suzanne will know, I would feel like getting public input too early until you have something for people to react to, it's very difficult for them. So if they say, yeah, we don't want it designed for trucks, that's valuable input. But if MDOT says, hey, sorry, we
Absolutely.
got $1 billion worth of businesses down here and we have 50,000 vehicles a day, that's not something you get to decide. This is how we're designing it. You don't want to create this unrealistic expectation.
I think we got to that similar point last time, and I think again, I don't want to speak for the group, but I think we agreed community involvement was critical, but that we wanted to come up with some goals and a plan first, so they had something to react to rather than a completely blank slate.
Yeah.
And
But you're not gonna
but
get
I'd
to
be
that
anxious to
point.
get there.
But my point is, you're not gonna get to that point, and so MDOT's gonna drive the corridor. That's all I'm asking. I'm just, I mean, this subgroup or engagement group would be based on when they get to it in 2024. So we're talking a year from now, so that's fine. I'm just trying to understand what would we be doing until then?
I'm not
So
willing
I
to
would
consider
think-
that. I wish we could get some preliminary design work so that we could push them, but I agree that we don't want to go to the community too much till we get some preliminary design work.
Absolutely.
But I may be wrong, I may be the minority.
No, I agree with that as well. I think we need to do that. And give the people an opportunity to react to something. When I say react to it, also include and come forward with some ideas as to how to make it work, that type thing. Rather have that information on the front end.
And some of it's gonna be public education too, because there's gonna be a lot of people who just, and MDOT warned me about it, you're gonna hear from a lot of people that just do not like the boulevard. Or they're not gonna like any type of change. So they're just gonna say, well, that's not gonna work. It's gonna be,
Right.
that's gonna be a disaster. There's gonna be accidents.
Mhm.
You won't be able to, if you're driving west, you just won't be able to go to businesses on the other side of the road. There's just no way it's gonna work.
But I assume that something like that is certainly not unprecedented. There's some probably tangible data that we can look at to either validate their opinion or say, we hear you, but the data indicates otherwise.
Well, that's why I say I think some of gathering public input is, helping to set parameters to get input, but also some public education on data and safety and
do both.
why it's being looked at to redesign and that type of thing.
Yeah, it'd be good to get out with our own. Once you have a design that somebody can look at, even if it's a preliminary design, to educate people on why you did a boulevard, to use your example, hey, we chose to do a boulevard because it increases safety and it slows speeds and it gives people a place to slow down in a turn lane. And, so I couldn't agree more.
And I think we will need some help from MDOT on that, because obviously if they're looking at that, they must have quite a bit of data that show this is what, for this type of area and this type of corridor, this is why we have to design somewhat to that standard.
Yeah. And I think so I think there's three components, the provide ideas part, the reacting to a design, and then the education part, which is really kind of before and during the provide ideas kind of portion of that. And so there is, I think, an opportunity to engage the public before they start designing in 2024. So you get some idea about what the expectations are for Delta Township, and what your priorities are. And MDOT has been historically good in my experience and respecting some of those. I mean, you've got to be reasonable, but for example, when they did the fix on 196, we had a policy that you're going to do 12-foot sidewalks. So to Tony's point about like how big is the sidewalk, like in this case, now this was in an urban area, so it's different. But if you find 5-foot sidewalks aren't enough, like you want to be able to also have a path next to it for bikes or some sort of design, being able to state that right at the beginning makes things a lot easier, and they just are going in eyes wide open. So to that point, the next slide is community engagement.
Okay. It's on the agenda.
So Suzanne, real quick, would it be beneficial to do some type of criteria then? As part of this process up front?
I think it would be. I think that you want to, I mean, to me, I guess my style is I like to know what the values are, like what's really most important, because that helps guide decision making, or it should, right? If you say this is most important, like pedestrians are more important than bicycles, right? So then that might tell me something different about how I should design than trying to treat everything equal. So I think knowing where you want to weigh things, because then you know what to fight for when you're working with MDOT versus what things you can let go of, but they might be good ideas, but it's not a hill worth dying on. So there's having kind of that understanding, because you've done some listening in the community, and as a group, you've kind of decided this is where we're at. That then would also help guide your decision making about funding things that, you know, for example, if you had a debate between a wider sidewalk and a big gateway signage for next fiscal year, you would know kind of which one it is based on the input you've received, which is most feasible. And, you know, not that the other one's not important, but it kind of helps you pick and choose too, I think. So we'd want to, so where I'm headed with it is one of my thoughts was the themes that we just talked about, right? We would start to kind of build on some of those themes that we heard, because that you took public input, really. I mean, if you think about it, it was more focused with certain, you know, special interest groups, but you took some public input already about what they think about the corridor. It's not the general public. And so then this next phase then for engagement would be, you know, let's go talk to the general public about what they think about the corridor. But to Scott's point, we've got to be very specific to manage expectations on what that is. I don't think it would be bad to ask them about ideas that they'd have for the corridor. Because I mean, that's kind of agnostic, you know, would just throw whatever at the wall. I mean, you don't know what you're going to end up with, but it also gives you a sense of priorities by having people share their ideas. So that might be very helpful.
To Tony's point, though, if you put out, and I agree with that, if you put out a list of, you know, we call it doing strategic planning assumptions. Here's some assumptions we're working under on this project. We're going to have a corridor. That doesn't mean somebody can't debate why that's an assumption, but we're going to have a boulevard, right? We should have facts to support why we're going to have a boulevard, but it may avoid somebody taking you completely down the road. And then, you know, some assumptions about growth, some assumptions about traffic, some assumptions about, you know, the need and the vision for business. Then I think you're right. I thought you were right before, but then you can say, you know, understanding those assumptions, what ideas would you like us to be considering and investigating, knowing we can't do them all, right? At the end of the day, every project, every business, every government operates under, we have more ideas than we have resources. So what resources do we prioritize? And you know, getting values and priorities weighted, I could, I look, that's how I try to operate every day when I'm at my best for our businesses, so.
Basically, just outline the purpose.
Yeah.
Purpose and need statement.
Suzanne, did you say a while back that you thought that we could do some of the surveys with the residents?
Yeah, we could totally do that. So we, one idea that we had, that I think I mentioned before, was doing an online survey. We could put it on the website. You've got the township newsletter. We could advertise it in there. You can also, we create a QR code. And so that QR code could be printed on like beverage coasters and provided in restaurants. So people, or on posters in businesses. So people just, we all know how to use it now because of COVID. And so that's a really easy way to get input. But it's been pretty effective.
And do we still want to do in-person kind of town hall meetings? You all.
I do. I
think we
mean,
have to.
for lack of a better term, people, number one, this is a public forum, so people can come here to voice their opinion and we should help get that word out. I doubt they will, or your own stuff though. It's like again, I can only relate to my experiences, so I apologize, but it's like the restaurant. Very few middle of the road people fill out surveys on the restaurant. They're either really happy for some reason or they're really mad for some reason, right? You don't go, yeah, that's all right. It's well expected, it's good, So, and I think this tends to bring that same thing out of the work. So you got to be careful not to react to the loud minority and really apply some intellectual debate, within the group that says, well, is it really that bad? Or should we just, do we really need bikes for 4 wide on bikes? Because somebody's going to show up and say, we're in a bike club and we need a path that lets us go 4 wide because it's safer. So,
They will show up 110%.
yeah, right. So, and again, do we need a spot for bikes? Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we do. But I think if nothing else, as much as I hate to say it, having the plausible argument that, hey, we had the CIA meetings and people were invited to that, and we did these things on public and we offered QR codes.
Yeah.
If you haven't been heard, number one, you may have been heard and just disagreed with. And number two, if you haven't been heard, it's really not our fault, it's your fault. There are plenty of options.
We have to offer a buffet of options
Yeah.
for people to do it, and so they can find one that's in their comfort zone to say, well, we did provide you this.
So in your opinion, Suzanne, do you think that we should start with a, QR survey, online survey first before we do a town hall, just to kind of see what that feedback is coming back?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that gives us some early data, just to kind of be able to take in, which might help guide the activities that we would do in the in-person town hall meetings. And then we'd also work with MDOT to get some of the data that they have. One thing that I just was reviewing maps today for a mobility plan I'm doing, and it was interesting because we had asked people where they feel comfortable crossing and where they don't, where it's easy to get around or what paths they take. And so in the community meeting, they mapped all of that and we digitized it, but then we had the data from MDOT to also put with it. And so so what the public perceives and what the data shows, right, then you can start to see how these things work together. And that part I love. It's really gratifying when you start to see those two things merge, the quantitative and the qualitative, because then you're really getting a story that, about that why you need to adjust things. If it's dangerous because you're having crashes and people are finding out it's hard to cross in their experience, like that then starts to speak to the need for the right investments that you want to make. So I imagine that we would have some sort of mapping exercise for the for the town hall meetings, that we would test values based off of the survey. We would have the survey and have them answer some values-based questions or priorities that we would then share back with them at the community meeting to make sure that we heard them correctly. And, you know, so and maybe even ask them then what are some of the characteristics that they would like to see along the corridor? If there's, you know, what would a really great Saginaw Highway corridor look like if they could design it? So sometimes you can have drawing exercises or other things that people can get their hands dirty a little bit and provide input that way too.
So Suzanne, this is just a question. If we wanted to start with a survey that could be followed up with other mediums for communication. And I like the idea of a QR code and a campaign to go around that. So businesses on the corridor we could make signs like you guys had to do when you had to notify people about the CIA board. They could post them in their businesses if they wanted, so people could walk in and see there's a sign about it and they could scan the QR code. That would lead them to the survey. I suppose direct mail or maybe better digital mail would be better if, I don't know how you communicate with the community the best and most efficiently. I like your idea about offering coasters for restaurants or something if they, want to try that or something, but it seems to me that whatever those are, it seems like there should be a group, whether it's this group or a subgroup that gets together and says, are we going to provide some basic assumptions? And what are the primary questions we want to ask, and are they open-ended or closed-ended or both? And how long do we think this survey, how many questions is the right number to get the best optimized engagement and get good data back? Seems like developing the survey would be really important to think about. And maybe there's experts who could help us with that.
And I feel like that would be, just from my perspective, while we're looking to maybe delegate a couple people for the MDOT conversation, I would honestly view that as like our task as a CA board to do that together. Like I would feel more comfortable if we were all doing it.
Question.
Makes sense.
All of it, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we need to be doing as an activity together.
I agree.
Big group. No, I said the larger group. No, I see what you're saying.
Well, that's funny that you said it because that was going to be one of our questions. When Brian and I were talking, we were like, do they have an engagement subcommittee? Do we do that? But that's funny.
I'm just jumping the gun, I apologize.
We do now. We do now.
You all are the engagement subcommittee. Well, and I think actually that's okay. I mean, if you think about, you all are on the CIA because you bring different perspectives, right? You have different backgrounds. Some of you are representing more community at large, while others residents or business owner or property owner or an organization. So I think having all of your input on that would be important and valuable.
So when we look at the calendar, when do you think that we should start working on our survey form? Like starting next month?
Could definitely start it next month if that's possible. I think that was the day. Yes. I gave Brian a list, like I have the worst April I've ever had. So I'm like, I know I have a conflict on the 17th. So I'm like, yes, but what I could do is give you, I could prepare the questions and we can have, I can solve it. Don't worry about it. Yes, we can do that on the 17th. Your next meeting.
Okay.
Is there somebody is there a material expert in that we could invite or should invite to intellectually challenge us about the best way to optimize a survey like that, or you don't think so?
Suzanne, right? Or no?
Suzanne, I think definitely can help with the content, and I don't know her experience with surveys, but if we get a draft and then we can bat it around, and then we can, there are other people we work with to help just
Like
tweak the
distribution and
questions.
stuff like that kind of thing.
Just to make sure that the questions give us what we're.
Questions or is 20 okay?
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Mhm.
I figured it was.
Well, because there are like
Next
questions like,
meeting
do
that
you want to ask demographic information and
Say it again.
April 10th.
Okay, she said the 17th.
Wait.
Yeah, are we doing it
It's
the 10th or the
the 10th,
17th?
right?
Our meeting's on the 10th.
Was it real time?
on the 10th?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
That's what it says here.
Oh, wait, it is on the 10th. I am in Houghton and Hancock on the 10th, so I have conflicts on both the 10th and the 17th. And on the 3rd, because I'm in Philadelphia, so it's a crazy month. So I do have a conflict on the 10th. I do not have a conflict on the 24th.
Just
we
need
call
to
a
start.
special meeting. Don't move it to the 17th. We have a Waverly Foundation meeting.
24th sounds good.
I was gonna say, I would hate, I don't want to move the regular meetings. I mean, if we had to call a special.
Yeah.
meeting.
Special meeting, yeah,
I'd rather call a special meeting.
call a special. Yeah. Do that.
Off the progress, I'm sure you guys get more meetings.
So then could you attend the special meeting then on the 24th? Is that what you said?
Absolutely, yep, I could do that. Into the question of like, do you like, who are the experts that you would get to talk about that or to look at the survey? I have worked with colleges and universities before, certainly researchers. It depends on kind of really what you want as a group out of the survey. If you just want the general temperature of the public, we can figure out those questions. I mean, if you want to get really deep into, well, who's answering what are they looking for? And you want to start to kind of splice and dice and do different things with the information, then it's a more structured process. So it kind of depends on what you think is needed for the survey to be able to pair it with the right questions that we do. And it's academics, sometimes it can make it a little bit painful, but sometimes their insights about how you ask the question is valuable.
I have a question. Do we only plan on certainly, I kind of envisioned that we would survey throughout the process based on where we were at. Is that on the table, or is this like the only time we're going to be doing a survey to the public?
You guys can do whatever you want.
Like, I mean, I'm not talking like, let's jump in and do 20 surveys, because that's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But I mean, like throughout, like, would there, like, I envision like, would there be like another opportunity as we get further down the road to like do a specific survey and then like to get more, to pinpoint and like drive down maybe potential aspects of the plan that we will be doing?
I think onions are good if it's fiscally responsible.
Well, yeah, there's that too. I mean,
Yeah,
I think we have almost two things. One, we have the timeline of the boulevard over here.
sure,
That is kind of like on a harder timeline. And then we have kind of the overall corridor plan.
right. That's kind of
So
what,
there
that's
is-
kind of where I was going with that.
Yeah,
So
so there's definitely some overlap, but the full overall corridor plan, we have probably a lot more time, or maybe not a lot more time, but more time to get public input and that type of thing. So I mean, surveys are pretty easy to put out, so.
one
I think-
newsletter cycle.
Yeah, we have a lot of different ways to put it out there. So with our other plans or non-motorized plans and parks, rec master plans and those types of things, we've typically gotten really good feedback or good response to it. I don't know about this, how the response would be to this, but I mean, we use the same mediums to get it out there. We should hopefully.
But as far as doing a survey specific to the MDOT
Mhm.
and an improvement that should happen in 24 or design, we could do a separate survey specific to that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
A little bit later. I don't know that we need to do that now because I don't know that we have enough information.
Yeah, I would recommend if you're my connection's unstable all of a sudden, so if I go in or out,
We're
excuse me.
basically whispering too, so sorry about that.
Oh, no, it's okay. I think to me, this first blush with the community input is to get that vision and values piece, just more generally, people.
But the 3,000 foot approach, right, is what we're talking about?
Yep.
Okay.
And then people react best to when you were talking about corridors, when I think we can pick up some information from them during the community process. And then MDOT is also supposed to hold their own public input session on the actual design of the road, but usually that's not a really robust engagement process at all. So you're kind of doing MDOT stuff for them in a way, but when you get down to like where's the pedestrian crossing in the actual design, I think people will have that at some point in the future. They'll be able to react to that in 2024. But this initial piece is really trying to understand the general public's priorities so that you can start to kind of know where some of your energy should go as you think about the design of the corridor.
That's good.
Perfect, thank you.
Mhm.
That's helpful.
And what I can do is I can also, in addition to the draft survey, provide you with a draft calendar. So to Brian's point of the timeline for the boulevard design, we want to make sure that you're kind of lock and loaded, ready for 2024 when MDOT's ready to hire their designer or their, and then so you already know what your asks are going to be in advance. So I will do a calendar based on that assumption so that we kind of, you're prepared so you know kind of where we need to be during this next year.
That would be great.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
So Brian, I got a quick question for you. Since she will not be at our next meeting, what's on the agenda for that?
Well, I think this planning process has been pretty much the same one. So initially, I had talked to Suzanne about having, if you remember, from her firm, we had an MDOT transportation or a transportation expert who was here. So Suzanne, would you recommend we still have him in it? And then maybe that might help talk about, flush out some questions we might want to ask as well.
Yeah, you could do that. And what I would also do, Mashri Valentine on my staff could also share some early information with you. Mashri does, she and I work very closely together on community engagement. And she lives like practically right across the street from where you guys are at. She lives in one of those apartment buildings. So she's really familiar with the corridor too. And I know how we do the engagement. She's the one who runs the surveys for me and everything. So I think she could certainly attend on the 17th and help answer questions as well.
The 10th.
And the 10th. Sorry, the 10th.
No, you're good. Wait.
I'm going to write it. I'm writing it down in big.
More confusion about our meetings.
I'll be there on the 24th. The 10th, I'll get Chris and Mashri to attend.
What'd you say your name is? Marsha?
Mashri, Maushharie. It's a mashup of her mom and her dad's name,
I like it.
which is really fun. Yeah.
And yes, I think that would be great to have her. Thank you.
You'll love her. She's great. She was an architect by training, and I'm making her a planner. Like, it's so much better.
It's funny.
So I will put that on their calendars right after we get off the call. So I think that was it for that I think we had on the agenda. So I don't know if there's anything else that you want to discuss.
Anything else?
Nothing for me.
Oh, that's good.
All right. I think that's it, Suzanne. Thank you so much for coming out. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. You guys are really good discussion today.
Yeah. Well,
Great to see you. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good April.
Thank you.
We'll see you at the end.
See you later.
All right, folks, other business. We have our regularly scheduled meeting for April 10th. We're gonna have, say her name again, Marjorie.
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 For me.
Okay, come and help us out. That'll be great. And yeah, I think that's where we're at, folks. We've had a good meeting. Anything else?
Before we adjourn, I just wanted to say, had a conversation with Brian. Brian Torek. I just wanted to let you guys know. One of the reasons why he's not attending, and it's kind of sad, his wife has cancer and she has entered hospice care.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's why he's missing and we will probably be missing for a little bit of time, moving forward. But he wanted us to know that he definitely is still committed, obviously, to the work of the CIA and still wants to be engaged, but, has to step back temporarily, as he deals with this.
Sad. Did we send him a card or something?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Mhm.
Okay. Let's see, what else was? That is something that slipped my mind.
I gotta ask the question, is there anything going with, Chris? Is that like the?
I want to ask you.
Yeah. Is there any updates? Because then when we talked last, I believe March was sort of the day, the month that things were going to sort of be cleared up, and here we are in March. Is there any more?
It wasn't cleared up. I think that they had,
Mm-mm.
and I can jump in, they had a mediation, but they were unable to work
Okay.
things out in mediation. So
Okay.
it's gonna continue to go forward. It's gonna continue to go forward for probably a long time. I don't see, this wrapping up anytime soon. So I think any hopefulness that Chris had that he would somehow get control back and be able to start moving forward is not gonna happen.
Okay.
anytime soon.
And when we are to assume that like continued development is halted until that's solved. Outside of, like, the Olive Garden and the-
His
Yeah.
plans
His
are
part,
halted.
yeah, okay.
Now his former partners, if you want to call them that, they have control of the phase
That's
1
what I
and
thought.
2. So conceivably, you could potentially, I guess, see them build and, the spaces that were there and ready to, have other businesses
Yep,
go in.
That
So
makes sense.
you could potentially see something happen there, but yeah, Chris is until the things get resolved, he's just dead in the water.
Oh,
Yes.
thank you.
Again, is that binding mediation or
No.
non?
It's just the, as often the case, a judge will tell the parties to sit down and
Figure
try
it
to
Yeah.
work it out
Yeah.
on their own, and
Yeah.
obviously they weren't able, the sides were not willing to really come to a deal, it sounds like.
Yeah, this could go on for
Okay.
quite a while then. Yeah.
So does that building that's over there, just the walls, the cement walls, that's just like in limbo too?
That is, we've communicated to them that they have to, do some stuff, because, they have to secure it and everything and stuff, but as far as the at home. I believe that's nothing's moving forward on that.
All right.
Bizarre.
Yeah, it is. Never would have thought of that, right?
No.
Yeah, on a separate matter, how long is the construction plans for Myers?
For the store.
Yeah, I mean, they're aggressively hitting it.
Yeah, I can't remember what their full timeline is, and I'm always hesitant to give the
Yeah, of
timeline that
course,
they give us because it never seems like it hits. But I'll have to.
I just didn't realize they were doing that much. That's
Yeah.
good.
They do
that they're
yeah,
investing in it.
but
I mean,
It wasn't,
It was.
it didn't seem that bad. I mean, at the end of the day, it didn't seem
Yeah.
terrible. It took a long time, but it didn't seem terrible.
It looks like they're building a smaller shell of the building itself, just taking it down some. But
That front part is being
Mhm.
pushed back. So the
Mhm.
front that we normally go in,
Mhm.
that's not gonna be there.
Mhm.
Further
The
back or
interior.
further? You think it's getting smaller, not bigger?
They took yeah, it looks like it is, but it could be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought they were adding
I
a
thought they
little
were
bit,
expanding just.
a little bit to it.
Okay.
Not
To the
a
east?
ton, but
You're gonna
I can't remember. It's been a while since I've seen the plans. I mean, and I've gone over there and look what they did, but
You don't
you know.
know, Scott.
Right.
I just, obviously I'm right by there, but yeah, it looked like they're building walls out to the north
Mhm.
and look, and they're gutting the inside fairly significantly. So they're refacing it, refreshing it.
Yeah, it's a pretty aggressive project and, it's pretty much redoing the entire inside and then the facelift will look nice, very similar to the Grand
Yeah.
Ledge.
Okay.
I still don't.
I mean, I think
know
that's
anything
good for the
is, just
corridor
what's
that
up,
they're
so much.
reinvesting there because of,
Well, you know,
I think many of our peers have been migrating west.
Yeah.
I'm like aisle 7 had this.
No, it doesn't like it.
Oh my gosh, every time I go there.
Tunnel exit.
Like, I only got a couple minutes. Where is this? You know, simple things.
Well, we had as a corridor, you know, Suzanne mentions Plainfield corridor, which
Mhm.
ironically, I was just up there this weekend. I mean, we are fortunate, I know, with such a long corridor, there's areas that are tired and definitely need improvement, but I mean, we've had significant reinvestment in the corridor, so there's a lot to celebrate. I mean, the Farm Bureau one itself is like $60 million investment, but that's not a, you know, immediate, you know, something that
It's
people
not as sexy as
notice,
getting an
but,
Olive Garden, unfortunately.
right.
Yeah.
Same with, you know, Meyer, but yeah, we've had
Yeah.
a lot of reinvestment into the corridor, so.
It's good. Definitely good. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So.
Or,
Or
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Meeting
Appreciate it.
adjourned.
I love it.
hey, hey.
Good cat.